Right, so the deal is done. Trump and the Houthis will no longer attack each other. And Trump has bragged to the world that the Houthis capitulated to him. But like most of the words that dribble from the chin of the satsuma-skinned sociopath that passes for the United States president, it's all a lot of nonsense. Because all he's actually done is give in to demands the Houthis laid down 2 months ago in terms of a ceasefire deal. And if he'd listened, the US would now be some $1 billion better off, because that is how much cash has been wasted striking civilian areas of Yemen, wasted through the loss of multi-million-dollar drones and jets, and doing nothing to stop the Houthi strikes at all, continuing unabated as they have. Fighting the Houthis for Israel's sake has cost Trump not just in terms of US cash, but also politically. His promise to the American people broken as he defends Israel at US cost. So the news that he's walking away is enormously welcome. Not only because the Houthis have won the fight against the US without making any concessions, but also because Israel has just found itself isolated like it hasn't been in a very long time. Right, so Donald Trump has agreed to a ceasefire with Yemen's Houthi movement, a group that he has branded as a terrorist proxy of Iran, and so much of the media has besides, a direct threat to American and Israeli interests in the Middle East, despite it actually being nothing of the sort. They're a threat to Israel over their genocide of Gaza, and that is on them. They never have been a direct threat to the US, and US intervention has only ever been seen as serving Israel's interests anyway. It's literally one of the main reasons Joe Biden lost, after all. Despite Trump's bombastic claims that the Houthis have capitulated to his demands, the reality, which was confirmed hilariously by mediating parties in Oman, presents the reality of the situation. You see, Trump has in fact given the Houthis precisely what they proposed 2 months ago. Stop bombing us, and we'll stop targeting your ships. When Trump addressed the media a few days ago, proclaiming victory and forcing the Houthis to stand down, he attempted to frame the ceasefire as a triumph of American strength and negotiation. He's having a bit of a flex. It's almost as if the Omani representatives, who were the main mediators in indirect talks between Washington and Sana'a, thought to themselves, "Oh really, in the aftermath? Is that what happened, is it?" and decided the record ought to be corrected. According to a tweet from Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi, following recent discussions and contacts conducted by the Sultanate of Oman with the United States and the relevant authorities in Sana'a in the Republic of Yemen, with the aim of de-escalation, efforts have resulted in a ceasefire agreement between the two sides. In the future, neither side will target the other, including American vessels in the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb Strait, ensuring freedom of navigation and the smooth flow of international commercial shipping. The Sultanate of Oman expresses its gratitude to both parties for their constructive approach that led to this welcome outcome, and hopes that it will lead to further progress on many regional issues towards achieving justice, peace and prosperity for all. So not one side capitulating to the other at all, therefore, but this doesn't put matters into quite the correct context still. Another Yemeni source very much did, though, as researcher Alden Markey tweeted out in response to al-Busaidi's tweet that Oman's foreign minister has just shattered and demystified Trump's earlier statement with a single tweet. Lol. The US agreed to the exact demands the Ansar Allah raised months ago. Stop attacking us, and we will stop attacking US warships. The agreement does not include or involve Israel, and Yemen's Red Sea blockade on all Israeli shipping will continue, as well as direct missile strikes on occupied Palestinian territories. Yemen has won. So the Houthis had extended this very offer months ago. The terms had remained completely unchanged. Halt US strikes in Yemen and the Red Sea attacks on US shipping would stop. Trump merely agreed to what had been on the table all along after he'd blown $1 billion in yet another pointless dust-up with the Houthis that got him nowhere. So why the charade then? Well, Trump's ego can't take losing ever, for one. He has to try and save face here somehow in the wake of a failed and costly military campaign. Since the Israel-instigated collapse of the Gaza ceasefire, the US has spent over $1 billion in air and naval operations targeting alleged Houthi installations across Yemen. More often than not, though, it ended up being civilian infrastructure. Yet despite all of that, the Houthis not only remain defiant, but have continued with their retaliations and strikes on Israel unabated. One of the most surprising aspects of this ceasefire for all concerned, though, as already mentioned in the response by Alden Markey, is the explicit exclusion of Israel from its terms. Trump has put America first, you might say, a point I'm going to come back to actually in a moment, in that attacks on Israel are not included in this ceasefire deal in any way at all. In other words, the Houthis have given no ground whatsoever in their ongoing strikes on Israel, and Donald Trump has basically said, okay, you do you. As you can imagine, Israel's reaction has been one of shock, horror, sheer astonishment even. The Times of Israel, for example, reported that Trump's Houthi truce was met with astonishment in Israel, with officials now fearing that he will seek a similar de-escalation with Iran, as US-Iranian talks are set to proceed even further, when all Israel wants to see is Iran's nuclear program ended by force, preferably the US's. Israel's defense minister, little madman that he is, Israel Katz, has gone on record warning the Houthis to prepare for heavy retaliation. But if the US couldn't stop them and have now given up trying, what are you going to do, spread as thin as you are? I dare say the US won't stop shipping weapons to Israel, but they're being used against more and more enemies that they are making on more and more fronts, and now there's no US backup militarily, not where the Houthis are concerned anyway. Trump, through this deal, has effectively abandoned Israel to the Houthis' fate, if you like, choosing instead to pivot towards doing his own deals with other Middle Eastern states like the Houthis here, possibly Iran, that's ongoing, and a deal with the Saudis over oil as well. So in doing so, he's left Benjamin Netanyahu politically exposed, diplomatically isolated, and it frankly couldn't happen to a nicer person. Trump is precisely the sort of friend Netanyahu deserves to have. For the Houthis, aligning themselves with Gaza's suffering has been both a moral and strategic choice. It has helped them gain legitimacy across the Arab and Muslim worlds and has redefined themselves not just as Iranian proxies, but as regional actors in their own rights, resisting imperialism and resisting genocide. For so long they've been regarded as underdogs not worthy of secondary consideration, but that can't be said any longer. By continuing to attack Israel whilst halting strikes on US interests, the Houthis have demonstrated they are a force to be reckoned with, have isolated Washington's Middle East policy, as pro-Israel as it has been up until now, and exposed the US for backing the oppressors against the oppressed with all of the negativity that invites upon those making such decisions. The ceasefire also marks a quiet admission of American military failure. Despite all the overwhelming firepower and the advanced surveillance capabilities, all the toys they could bring to the field, the US could not beat the Houthis, could not prevent the Houthis from disrupting maritime trade or downing advanced military assets, and now in the name of protecting those assets and not losing any more, they've abandoned trying to save Israeli shipping and fighting the Houthis on Israel's behalf in any way going forwards. 7 $33 million US drones have been lost. The USS Harry S. Truman has now lost 2 F-18 jets worth some $72 million each. One slung off the deck last week as the Truman took evasive manoeuvres from a Houthi drone strike. The other through pilot error just the other day, both pilots having to eject before that jet fell into the sea as well. In practical terms, the US has spent $1 billion, lost lives, lost equipment, and gained nothing. The Houthis remain ever defiant. Israel remains under threat as they keep Gaza under threat, such as they deserve. They're bringing it on themselves. And the American public, increasingly war-weary, as I'm sure they are, with a nation that's been constantly at war for decades anyway, least of all in the here and now with regards to the Houthis, have justifiably been asking, of course, what was the point of all of this? So this brings us back to Trump and his America First claim to power, because this debacle is not just about foreign policy mismanagement. It's a political liability for Trump at home as well. Having built his brand on America First, stood on that platform of America First, Trump has instead pursued a course that many see as Israel First. Constant bombing campaigns in Yemen, a country that has never attacked the US mainland, have drawn criticism even from his own base, which questions the benefit of endless wars in the Middle East. Even the BBC has echoed this growing sentiment as wet and weak on the subject of Israel as they have been, noting that Trump backed down, not the Houthis, in a piece that they put out, and that his administration had failed to achieve any of its stated objectives in Yemen. Another revealing dimension of the ceasefire is the role played by Saudi Arabia here, which quietly urged Trump to stop bombing Yemen, apparently, ahead of his upcoming visit there, which happened the other day. Riyadh was very eager to avoid regional escalation, which Trump's visit was thought might happen. But as I touched on a moment ago, now signed a new oil deal with the US that notably also excludes Israel from its terms. Well, why would Israel have a feature in the said deal, Damo, you might think? Well, since when does Netanyahu not have his hand out asking, where's mine? Because he did. There appears to now be a broadening shift in Middle Eastern political dynamics, with the US backing off its unquestioning support and defence of Israel, with Gulf nations less willing to follow Israel's hardline path and more inclined towards stabilisation and doing their own deals with Trump as he turns his back on Israel to some extent, let's put it. It all emphasises this. For Israel, this is yet another betrayal, of course, crying victim. But if this is an early sign want to underscore their influence now waning in a region that is increasingly looking to their own futures and not over their shoulders at what Israel is doing as much, then that's all to the good. As for the Houthis, well, their success continues to grow amidst their truce with the US. Without US cover for Israel versus the Houthis, that aerial blockade of Israel the Houthis announced a few days ago is that much more solid now, and airlines have responded accordingly. Virgin Atlantic has just become the third airline now to permanently cancel flights to Tel Aviv, following two other major carriers, Turkish Airlines and Pegasus Airlines, that have cited Houthi strikes as the reason for that. Perhaps the most alarming consequence for Israel is the growing momentum behind that potential US-Iran deal, though. With Trump having shown willingness to deal with the Houthis, a group ideologically and militarily aligned with Iran, if not their proxies, the Houthis would say they become more and more independent from them, of course. Israeli officials fear this may be a prelude to a formal deal between the US and Iran being reached, and that nuclear research Iran is doing will be able to continue, despite Israel wailing about nuclear weapons that have nothing to do with Iran's nuclear program anyway. Perhaps more concerning to Israel even than that, though, is that Israeli intelligence is now concerned that Trump's pivot may reflect a deeper strategy to wind down America's entanglements in the Middle East. So many of them in Israel's interests, far more than America's, of course, even at the cost of abandoning Israeli priorities like that long-sought confrontation with Iran. Well, as you can imagine, all of this has left Israeli officials rather furious, particularly since their own military campaign in Gaza is increasingly viewed as a genocide across the world, that they are guilty of the most grievous of war crimes. Trump's ceasefire may be the clearest signal yet that the US no longer views unquestioned support for Israel as tenable or in its own national interest, and my God, wouldn't it be about time? But personally, I'll believe that when the weapons shipments stop too. However much analysis of this situation we care to do, though, Trump's ceasefire with the Houthis is a capitulation, not a conquest. It marks the culmination of a failed military strategy. It's exposed deep rifts in the US-Israel alliance, and has underscored a growing realignment in Middle Eastern geopolitics as Israel now looks an awful lot weaker. More than anything else, it forces a reckoning with the contradictions of American foreign policy, endless support for an apartheid regime, multi-billion-dollar wars with no strategic gain, and the abandonment of any pretense of moral high ground. And I have to ask where this leaves the Israel lobby and AIPAC at this point, though, having so heavily backed Trump before. The Houthis may well still be vilified in Western pro-Israel capitals, but in this instance, they've outmaneuvered the world's largest military power and redrawn the map of regional resistance. Trump, for all of his bluster, has only highlighted the limits of American imperial power, and in doing so may have just reshaped the Middle East in a way no bomb ever could. Just one victory in the Middle East, though. We don't get many of them. We don't seem to, do we? We do need a lot more of those. The American public must demand an end to foreign policy to prioritise Israeli aggression over the lives of others. Demand Trump go further in turning his back on Netanyahu's insanity. And the global community must continue to hold genocidal regimes like Israel accountable, no matter how powerful their supporters may still be. Meanwhile, ahead of the news breaking, the Houthis had announced that they have some new tech to bring out, which they say will help not only blockade Israeli airspace, but enforce it too in the wake of their successful strike on Ben Gurion Airport. Check out this video recommendation here to get all the details of that story, and this recommendation here is your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new content published daily, as well as supporting the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated. Holding power to account for ordinary working class people, and I will hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers folks.